Coming up on the show today, Daggerheart. We're going to talk about the rules, comparisons to 5e D&D, the community's reception to it, and how this game from Darrington Press could impact the future of TTRPGs.
Are you ready to get casual? Grab your favorite adult beverage or combustible plant and join us for our roundtable TTRPG discussion. Oh yeah, it's time for Casual Friday. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, how we
Hey.
doing? It's Friday and we're being casual. I'm Jim, that's Brad, that's Ryan down there. So let's get into it. Ooh, that's little down there, isn't it? I guess everybody can still see it though. We're trying out a new thing where it will show chat live on the screen. So I don't know, we're gonna see how that goes. Anyway, let's get into it. This week, oh, it scrolls up too. This is nice.
I like it.
So this week, Daggerheart from Darrington Press finally dropped after being non-existent for 6 months and being in playtest for a year before that. The final version finally released. I got my copy last Saturday or Friday. No, last Friday. I got mine a couple days early, and then I got access to the PDFs and everything on Tuesday of this week, and there's been a hey Will, there's been a flood of videos and a big media blitz to do with Daggerheart, and so I thought right up the top here I would just give everyone a quick little tutorial of how Daggerheart works, mostly by digging into a character sheet. So let me go through share here. Okay. So we're going to take a look at Schmertblurgen, who is a Wanderborn Fungrel Nightwalker rogue. I know a lot of those words don't mean anything to you yet, and that's fine.
I have a
But
question.
yes, Ryan. Yes.
What? Yeah. What do most of those words mean?
Schmertblurgen is the character's name.
No, I got that part.
Nightwalker is the subclass. Rogue is the class. Fungrel is the species, or is called ancestry in this game. And Wanderborn is the community, or basically like background from D&D.
Ooh, so we got like culture and ancestry, and fungal. I imagine is mushroom dude.
Yeah, mushroom dude. Yeah, they call it in this game. You have your class and your heritage. Heritage is your community and your ancestry. So Wanderborn Fungal. And I'll show you in a couple minutes why Wanderborn is amazing. Okay, so we've got 6 stats here: agility, strength, finesse, instinct, presence, and knowledge. If you're looking for the D&D comparisons, there is no constitution, and dexterity has been split out into 2 stats: agility and finesse. Instinct is basically perception. In fact, it tells you right there. I mean, wisdom.
That's
It
nice.
says perceive, sense, navigate. Presence is charm. Think stage presence. That'll help you remember it. And knowledge is basically intelligence. But the great thing here is it tells you exactly what you can do with each of them. Right there. And now Daggerheart doesn't have skills the way D&D has skills, but it has a very interesting idea called experiences that I think is from Cipher System. It's from there's a slew of systems listed, impressively listed in the front of the Daggerheart book and not in the back of the book, where they say we stole these things from these systems, and this is one of them. Well, experience is a skill you get to make yourself. It can be whatever you want. For my rogue here, I picked Sly Grin. I thought that might help him during negotiations. And Escape Artist if he needs to make a hasty getaway. All right. Any questions on the stats or experiences so far?
I like the experiences. I've seen that in a couple of different games. Some games you'll call it backgrounds or whatever, but it's just like this kind of tag, right? Like you can make up anything there.
Yeah, within reason.
Yeah, I mean you can't be like I have godlike powers, but
Yeah, and I it's the kind of thing you can make it as specific as you want, but being more specific might be to your detriment.
right.
Like on the Daggerheart did a like a 2-shot or 3-shot with Critical Role did a 2 or 3-shot with Daggerheart like 6 months ago. Marisha Ray played a bard who was a burlesque dancer, and one of her experiences was called weaponizing the male gaze.
Mm,
That's probably too specific, but it was, it was funny.
Yeah.
it has
It
broad
kind
appeal.
it kind of reminds me of the is it One Unique Thing? Is that what it's called in 13th Age?
That's
I
who they're
think it
giving
is.
credit for. That's who
I
they're
think
giving
it was.
credit to for this. Yeah.
Yeah, 13th age. All right. So going on from traits and experiences to HP, stress, and armor. So in this game, everyone has the same four stats. Some classes get a special stat, but everyone has the same four stats of hit points, stress, uh, hit points, stress, and hope. The easiest way to remember it is like Skyrim. Hit points are your red health bar, hope is your blue mana bar, stress is your green stamina bar.
Well, that makes sense.
It's not entirely like hope is magical and stress is physical, because they're pretty much they can do both things with both. But basically, that's it. When your stress fills up, you can't do your stuff
And
because you
if you
need
go
stress to.
over on stress, you take a hit point loss as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the most confusing part of the game here is hit points. Because instead of a 1-to-1 damage to hit point ratio like D&D does, it uses thresholds. And initially I was opposed to the idea. I thought it was needlessly complicated. However, after playing Daggerheart, I see it's actually pretty sweet because it still allows you to roll a bunch of dice and get big numbers, but then it keeps the banded accuracy super low. Because like you
Okay.
start the game with 5 to 6 hit points, and then the most hit points you're probably going to have even at level 10 is probably like 7 or 8. But what happens as you level up is your damage thresholds get larger. You can take more damage to mark the same amount of hit points. So basically, the way it works is if a monster hits you for 1 to 5 damage, that would count as 1 hit point. Between 6 to 11 would be 2, and 12 and above would be 3. And there's a little calculator here, so the monster hits you for 24 hit points. I'm not resistant to the damage, and it would mark 3 hit points. But then here's where armor comes in. Armor allows you to bump the damage down by 1 threshold. So, yeah, so if you have 3 armor slots, then you can do that 3 times.
Gotcha.
And then you have to repair your armor during downtime.
Yeah, that was my initial reaction to this. Is it seemed unnecessarily complicated, um, but I feel like not that it's as complicated as Thaco, but I feel like once you grok this, right, the math is actually pretty straightforward because
Yeah.
you're basically looking for the number to land in a category, and then it determines whether you take 1, 2, or 3 hit points, right?
Yeah, and it's able to keep every resource reasonable. Like the highest hit point creature I think I saw had 12 hit points.
Hmm.
And that was like a tier 4 solo boss.
Gotcha.
Um
So it
It
definitely
seems nice because
it definitely truncates the math that way.
yeah, and no one's getting one shot in the first volley of combat.
Yeah, well, I agree. It does sound unnecessarily complicated, and that's what I thought before I played it. But it really only took just a little bit longer for the players to understand, and then I like the way it keeps the numbers low, because it makes every short rest impactful. You know, when you only have 6 hit points, being able to clear 1d4 hit points at a rest is really really important. That rest is pretty crucial, right? And you're not gonna be at level 17 and have 150 hit points and 60 temporary hit points from this, plus your maximum increased by aid. You know, it's and as you because in Dungeon, you play high level D&D, as you get higher levels, the monsters just hit harder anyway, right? Because you're taking about the same number of hits based on basically your class, right? When you're level 2, the monster's hitting you for 5 hit points. When you're level 15, the monster's hitting you for 35.
Right.
So it's essentially the same kind of system anyway.
Yeah, high level D&D is just the ratios are about the same. It's just the numbers are bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So moving on, next up is weapons. We don't really need to cover too much of this. One thing I could mention, talk about here is proficiency. The game keeps damage pretty simplified. There are 4 tiers: level 1, level 2 to 4, level 5 to 7, and level 8 to 10. Tier 1, 2, 3, 4. And your proficiency matches your tier, but you can increase your proficiency without your tier. So like when you're level 1, you're tier 1, which means your proficiency is 1, which means you do 1d8 plus 1. At level 2, the proficiency is going to go up to 2, which means that same dagger does 2d8 plus 1 damage. Then at level 5, it goes up to tier 3, proficiency 3, which means 3d8, tier 4, 4d8. But when you level up, you can choose to increase your proficiency if you really just want to if you really want to focus on damage. You could be doing 6d8 plus 1 damage by level 9 with a little dagger. Domain effects. Oh, okay. So these are the cards that I took with the rogue class. So with the rogue class, there are 9 classes and there are 9 domains. Domains are like spell lists. Each class has access to 2 domains. The rogue gets access to the midnight domain, which they share with the sorcerer, and the grace domain, which they share with the bard. Midnight is stealth and dark magic kind of stuff. Grace is social manipulation, charm, that kind of stuff. So in my opinion, the rogue's like the most versatile class. They have sneak attack, but it's like one of their minor features. Unlike 5e, where the whole rogue class is built around getting advantage so you can sneak attack.
Right.
Anyway, okay, so this is one of my cards. So if I was playing this at a table, I would have this card physically right next to my character sheet so that I would know what my abilities are. Your advantage on action rolls to pick non-magical locks, disarm magical traps, or steal items from a target through stealth or by force. And then I took a spell also from Midnight. Spend a hope to make a spellcast roll and conjure throwing blades that strike out at all targets within very close range. Very close range is about 10 to 15 feet on the battlefield. Targets you succeed against take D8. It says D8 there with no number. That means you put your proficiency in the front of it. That makes sense? If the target you hit is vulnerable, you take an extra 1d8 damage. There's only 3 main conditions in the game: restrained, hidden, and vulnerable.
Question from chat. Are we on demiplane here? What are we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. This is Daggerheart Nexus on demiplane.
What does advantage mean on a 2d12 system?
I think I know the answer. Extra 1d6. Yeah, because it doesn't affect hope or fear. You just advantage and disadvantage is a 1d6. So one thing the rogue gets is I thought I was going to look at a card. So I said there were 3 conditions. Well, there are some special conditions, and the rogue gets one called hidden. And that essentially, if they're hidden and they don't move, they're invisible.
Gotcha. So that was one thing I was noticing is like it has those 3 main conditions, but then there's other conditions that are, class specific.
There are some monster specific. Monsters can cause certain conditions too.
Gotcha.
But in that case, it's all listed in the stat block.
What I find interesting about that design is it presents the game as pretty simple and straightforward to understand, right? So it's like you just have to grasp these 3 conditions when you're a first-time player, and then as you play, you discover the other conditions. It's just
it's more like you don't need to know what you don't need to know,
right?
Until it comes up, right?
Unlike Pathfinder 2, where they're like, "Here's the conditions," and there's like 22 of them or whatever.
Right. Fungirl. I love this ancestry. Make an instinct roll to use your mycelial array to speak with others of your ancestry. On a success, you can communicate across any distance or death connection while touching a corpse that died recently. You can mark a stress to extract 1 memory from the corpse related to a specific emotion or sensation of your choice. So basically a speak with dead.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So every ancestry comes with 2 features. So if you want to blend species, you take a top one from one and the bottom one from the other one. And then otherwise you can make whatever custom lineages you want.
That's clever
And
game design, because if there is like a if there if there's a like a power value to those, right? Then
yeah,
as long
hmm
as whenever you create a new species, you put the more powerful one on top, right?
right,
And that way it's balanced when you have a multi-species character.
right. And DC 20 does a kind of similar thing. Theirs is a little more complicated and flexible, where you have like ancestry points you spend on stuff, on certain abilities, so you can kind of pick from whatever list you want. And then my favorite feature of this class is the Wanderborn community feature. Nomadic Pack. Once per session, you can spend a hope to reach into this pack and pull out a mundane item that's useful to your situation. Work with GM to figure out what item you take out. This is a good example of Daggerheart's leaning into narrative for players in a more powered by the apocalypse kind of way. There are lots of abilities and spells and stuff like this that say describe how you, or name an NPC and describe how, like, it the mechanics encourage the players to actively participate in the narrative.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the criticisms that I had heard, with the playtest, is that there was concern that this would lean too heavily on the players, and the game master would be, juggling too much, and the players would be like, pulling too many threads. But that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be that the players can introduce cool stuff, but it's still up to the DM to kind of, you know, connect the dots and kind of weave those things that the players create together.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so we don't really need to look at the rest of that stuff. We talked about hit points. So let me talk about just a couple of these spells here. I've got a card here, but I don't know if you can really see that. That's the invisibility card. But this game makes heavy use of tokens. Because you don't have stuff like proficiency bonus times per day abilities. Like the invisibility says, place a number of tokens on this card equal to your spellcast trait. When the invisible creature takes an action, spend a token from this card. After the action that spends the last token is resolved, the effect ends. So if your spellcast trait, if your presence is 2, you put 2 tokens on it. The invisible person can do 2 things, then their invisibility fades. And here, like flight is the same kind of thing. It's an action. It's per action. And when it says action, that means anything that requires a roll. And then I really love this chain lightning spell. It's not as high damage as the 5e version, but it's way more fun because this truly chains. Once it hits somebody, any adversary within close range, which is about 30 feet, also gets zapped. So you can sneak into the rear of the enemy camp and zap them all while they're sleeping. So that's on my lecture. You guys have feedback there before we get into the next thing?
It seems like a fairly well designed game. It definitely, I still haven't played it yet. I'm just like digesting what everybody else is saying right now, and having looked at the book a little bit. Overall, it seems to be like a pretty good balance between crunch but ease of play. That definitely seems to be the goal, that they're trying to find that sweet spot where there's character options, there's a decent amount of actual crunchy rules to it, but it's not nearly as complex as fifth edition or Pathfinder or MCDM or Draw Steel or whatever it's going to be called.
Yeah, I saw the cards and the tokens as adding complexity on like first pass, and I'm realizing now, having again dipped my toes and begun to read the thing, it is way more user friendly, right? Like you can track all of your spells on your character sheet, or you can have spell cards. I wasn't here last week because we were playing a big D&D weekend, and one of my buddies printed spell cards for everybody, and everyone was like, "Oh, sweet. This is the most useful thing ever." So all of those cards that are not going to be a trading card game, I'm going to hope, are in fact they're just spell cards. The tokens, yeah, you could also create little circles on your piece of paper and fill them in like a Scantron and then erase them out. But having little doodads on a piece of paper makes it actually way easier, I think, to bring in new folks. I think we're seeing Critical Role be the main pipeline for Daggerheart here, but it's in my friendly local neighborhood game shop and it looks beautiful. We didn't really talk about the art, but like it jumps off the shelf at you. So that half a step, even like quarter of a step into like the world of board games, I think, yeah, it's the art throughout, but like the cover has a depth to it. I don't know. I'm not the art descriptor guy, but I think the more you can get the wingspan Settlers of Catan crowd to like dip their toes into a TTRPG, it is a net positive for me. I've seen all of the negative things so far that I've seen is like, oh, that's not how I like to play D&D. It's like, okay, cool. This is a new game and you have to like start from zero a little bit and kind of take it on its own terms. And any game that what is like page 2, page 3, they're like, hey, here's where all these cool ideas were inspired from. And like, dang, thank you. Like, can we all stop pretending that like we're all inventing stuff? Like, no,
Right.
your thing is not new. I'm not going to name names, but like, hey, this cool new thing that's existed for 30 years, and I, just found out about. You can interpret it, but like we're playing Strategio, like we're whatever. Anyway, that really made me happy to see immediately. Like, oh, cool. They're giving credit where credit's due. They're standing on the shoulders of giants and admitting it on page
Mhm.
2 and like specifically spelling out this cool mechanic we heard about from this game and we changed it a little bit, but not just like, here's our bibliography at the end of the book where you're never going to see it. That's huge. I would, if that becomes the new standard, awesome.
Yeah, mad respect for that. And one thing about Darrington Press, they about 2 years ago they put out a game called Candela Obscura, and it received a lot of flack in the industry for being one and done. Because, well, I mean, to be fair, it was only 2 years ago, and they've probably been pretty busy with Daggerheart. But I don't know if maybe they even said like, we're not going to put out any adventures or further Candela rulebooks. We're going to leave that up to the community. But a lot of people were pretty much down on Daggerheart before it ever came out, saying, they're going to put this out and they're going to abandon it on day one, and then we'll never get anything else, and they'll just rely on the community. Well, so what did Darrington Press do? Well, 2 days, or maybe even one day after the release, they put out UA for a
Mm,
playtest,
mm,
specifically to say, hey, look, we're not done. There's definitely more coming. So they put out two new classes, the Warlock and the Fighter, which their fighter's more like a monk. In Daggerheart, your marshals are your guardian and warrior. Guardian is tank, warrior's DPS. Warrior's the only class that gets opportunity attacks. It's the only creature in the game that gets opportunity attacks. And so yeah, so they're putting out this new stuff, and they've opened a website called The Void, where is a specific. This is an even bigger step, because this is bigger than just throwing a couple PDFs out there. They're saying, look, like, we even built a website that we're planning to utilize in the future, which I don't know, I find pretty compelling argument that they're serious about this as being their flagship game.
Yeah. Along those lines, my big question is, how are they going to put out adventure products? Because this game doesn't really lend itself to, like, here's a dungeon crawl, right? Because that's kind of the format that most of your D&D adventures are written in. Um, you know, it's, here's a map with a bunch of rooms, and and then we kind of design a story around these keyed rooms. Like, that's kind of the way you write a D&D adventure for the most part. Um, but this plays different in a lot of ways. So I'm curious to see like how do you do a published adventure for Daggerheart?
Well, they did put out a sample adventure, maybe near the end of the playtest. I don't remember what it's called, but it's a low level adventure, and you find your way aboard a pirate airship, and there's a mutiny, and I don't remember what it's called now, but it's free. You can get it for free on either Daggerheart.com or Darrington Press's website. But I leafed through that, and it does have a lot of role play and social stuff, but there's definitely combat and some dungeony areas in the ship to explore.
I see like setting books in their future. I mean, the first, well, actually, I'm second guessing this now, but I believe the first Darrington Press product was Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, right? And they've already put out a couple. That's been their bread and butter before this. I'm going to go out on a limb and say they probably did better than Candela Obscura or anything else they put out so far. Yeah, that was on the coattails of D&D 5e, but I think there's a lot of people who would just read Matt's world building, period, let alone have a accessible format to building your own homebrew version within his world building. So I think there's opportunity there. I don't know if they can pull it off, but I think more than like your typical whatever hardback 5e sort of linear, let's say to be polite, adventure design, it'll be more of like setting guides.
Yeah, well, they call them frames, right? Like in the core book, there's these settings that frames, and there's some really interesting ones in there. I
Yeah,
actually
we're gonna
found,
talk about the frames later.
yeah, I actually found that sample adventure you were talking about, and it does have like a 5-act structure. There's a page in it called a narrative overview, and it's like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, Act 5, and it has a little art for each. So yeah, because I think that talking about the longevity of a game, I think that is a key component to getting people to play your game is putting out adventures. Um, for two reasons. The obvious one being not everybody is going to homebrew their adventures. Not everybody, feels confident to make up, make their own homebrew or, um, ad lib stuff on the fly, right?
Yeah.
The other one being one of the things that keeps a hobby going is just having stuff to collect. People want to buy stuff for their hobby. And we know that from the wargaming hobby. If you're not constantly putting out new stuff, the gamers think that the game is dead. Like if you don't have stuff coming out every couple of months, people are going to be like, oh, well, the game's not supported anymore. I can't play it. Like that.
Yep.
And it's a weird attitude, but that's just the way it is. You've got to keep putting out content to keep your game in the forefront of, people's consciousness.
It's like what they say about passive income. You can only generate passive income if you're always actively working on it. Believe me, I've tried the passive income hustle. It doesn't work. Not as passive as they say.
No.
Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
No, I think what Brad's saying is like doubly true in a very unique way for this particular system, because like the elephant in the room here is like, is this campaign 4, right? Like not only is it like, okay, cool, they're making a UA, there's going to be more classes or more cards, splat books, whatever for this system, like is Critical Role going to be playing this game? Because if they're not, that is instantly a ton of air out of the balloon. I mean, I know they just did session 0 for one of their frames. Age of Umbra? Is that the title? Jim, tell the fine folks at home what you told us before we hit record, because it was an awesome name for this genre. Do you remember?
Crit Borg.
Yes, thank you. I
Yeah.
didn't want to steal your thunder.
I was like, wait, what did I say? I said something smart. What was it?
um, Critborg. So I could see them bouncing around between genres and stuff, but if they are, I don't know. See, this is the question. This is the question, and everyone has very strong opinions about it. Critical Role is a lot of things, and one is a business. So for them to not, I mean, there's people on the screen who disagree with me, but I think they're going to try. I think they're smart enough to not fully commit to a thing if D&D is their bread and butter, but I think we see them play a lot of Daggerheart, watch the metrics, and if they're relatively robust, right? Like not even flat, I think. If they're doing all right with Daggerheart, I really see them going all in on Daggerheart and maybe playing D&D mini arcs, mini campaigns. Because if you build your own bespoke system and not even you are playing it, that's a look. That's a real look for them. So I am very much aware that I could be wrong, but I would put my bet on them at least trying to make Daggerheart their prime engine for storytelling going forward on the show.
I think they should. I don't know if they will. I have my doubts. We got to move on. We are on the second thing. We're on our second bullet point of this whole thing.
I did a lot of work on the DMG, guys, so I would really appreciate it if we got there this time.
All right, moving on. So there is a review of Daggerheart in Ian World that just came out yesterday or 2 days ago. And I just wanted to highlight some quotes from this that I really like. Daggerheart tries to simultaneously offer a robust set of combat tools while also encouraging a collaborative storytelling environment between the player and GM. Although it's too chunky of a game system to really appeal to narrative game enthusiasts, it does stand out more than is just another game trying to out D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. And influenced by the likes of D&D 4th Edition, Genesis System, Blades in the Dark, and Cypher System, it wears most of these influences proudly on its sleeves, calling out the various RPGs that influenced its mechanics in its opening pages. For veteran RPG players, Daggerheart will feel a bit like that one Leonardo DiCaprio meme. While this might sound like a criticism, it's really not. What I can say is that Spencer Stark, lead developer, clearly has good taste in RPGs, as he's distilled a lot of great parts of other RPGs and mixed them together for a game that will still feel fresh to a lot of the game's intended audience. And I think the phrase intended audience is doing a lot of work there. Because this game's intended audience is probably people who've never played anything other than 5th edition, right? Because, you know, your average critter played almost entirely 5e except for that one time they got drunk and played Honey Heist, right? So
I feel seen.
So yeah, having these things like duality dice, it feels very fresh to someone who's never played anything other than 5e. Like, I'm not as familiar with Cypher or Genesis, but like the 4th edition stuff and the Blades in the Dark stuff, it's like incredibly obvious. And I think this review's right that it doesn't feel derivative because they're taking all the best parts, putting them in a stew, and I don't know, I think it pretty well works.
It's not just D&D with clocks or action points. It's not like, oh, we found this one cool thing. It's like, hey, we did a research project on all of the breaking, leading edge TTRPGs out there, cultivated all the best aspects, and built this beautiful Frankenstein monster. Like, what a great approach. And again, to be upfront and open and say that on page 2, like, hey, fear's a pretty cool mechanic. It's GM intrusions from the Cypher system, only we've combined it with all of these other cool things that we love and critter vibes. Enjoy.
And I think like Chat's talking about now, it is quite distinct from D&D, but I think the reason that it got lumped in, it gets lumped in with MCDM, Shadow Dark, Level Up Advanced 5e, a lot of D20 kind of systems, is because at a cursory glance, a lot about Daggerheart does look similar. You've got the classes are basically different versions. The ancestries, the species are you've got copies with different names, Infernus instead of Tiefling. That on the surface it looks like a lot of it's the same, and I think that it pulls in those 5e critters, the
Hmm.
people who know 5e, and they're like, well, a fun girl, I don't really grasp the concept of a mushroom person, but like a Draconis, a Dragonborn, sure, I could do that. And then you get the players in with these extremely familiar classes, species, backgrounds, and then the GM can unleash, under the hood, it's all different.
Right.
So for a GM, it is absolutely nothing like running 5e.
Yeah,
And
that's a
for
good point, and I think a lot of people don't realize that about Dungeons and Dragons is it's really two games, right? There's the
at
player
least
side and the DM side, right? Especially any edition that's not 3 or 3.5, you have these kind of two different sides of the game, right? So if you can make the player side of Daggerheart familiar to what players are used to with D&D, class, species, class abilities, that sort of stuff. But then the DM side has all these other tools that help you develop a narrative, these tools that help you, you know, apply a frame, the setting to your game. That then makes the game feel different.
and
So,
whether we call it chunky or crunchy, and I'm open to having more nuance in the crunchy, I don't know, vernacular spectrum, but having a game that you could describe as crunchy, I don't know exactly if I would put it above 5e or below 5e without like running it for a while. I think it always a relatively crunchy game always seems crunchier before you've kind of onboarded it because you're just looking uphill at the learning curve. You don't know where you are yet. Maybe that's just me, but the idea that it does have these more story based player contributions to the narrative that you would find in a much more rules light story game. It's very interesting to me. I think you could see some more gamery, min-maxery, optimizery people seeing or implementing these sorts of things for the first time and maybe liking the taste of having fundamentally deeply interesting tinkerable character creation and swapping out cards every level while also having the DM be like, what's this called? Make up a thing, like having both of those elements in the same game is very interesting to me. We'll see how it plays out. Like, again, I'm always hemming and hawing without a ton of experience in a game, having strong opinions about it. But I'm very curious, and I think it'll actually come down like table to table how people receive it. But it's cool. It's pretty different.
that's a
And
good
speaking of, sorry, Brad.
that's a good point. That seems to be where they're trying to land this plane, right? Is that they want enough crunch, right, to appeal to gamers, right? But they also want to introduce, people who aren't familiar with them, people who mostly have just played 5e. They want to introduce narrative mechanics as well. So that seems to be their goal, to kind of merge the narrative and the crunch. And my first kind of look through, it seems like they succeeded fairly well.
Well, and speaking of crunch and min-maxing, I'm not fluent in all of the abilities and all of the ways you could break the game yet, but I've already seen some things that are like, oh, you could optimize this if you wanted to. Like, for example, their warlock, their UA class, the warlock has an ability that every time you rest, you get two things you can do to like fix your armor, fix your hit points. The warlock can sacrifice one of their downtime moves to their patron to get this resource called focus. Well, so everybody gets two downtime moves, except if you're an elf. If you're an elf, you get an extra downtime move. So if you go elf warlock, you've balanced out. You get that ability, but you don't sacrifice any rest. So I think there's going to be plenty of ways like that in the game for you to to build more powerful character. But you know, when I was first playing with Daggerheart, I thought I really had this belief that like the fact that it only went through levels 1 to 10 meant that we were getting Daggerheart Advanced. That would go like a levels 11 through 20 or 11 through 16 or something like that, because it just felt like 10 wasn't enough. But now after that I've seen all the final abilities and looked through all of the like level 9, 10 abilities, none of them are exactly game breaking, but they're getting close enough that I don't think this game needs to have levels 11, 12, and 13.
Hmm.
I feel like 10 is enough, because any more than that you're going to have to start game breaking. You're going to start adding wish and stuff like that.
Hmm.
The expense of at the chance of being hated. I think 10's enough for D&D too.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
was thinking about it, I was like, why would they spend the effort to write a whole book that's like levels 11 through 16 that most people aren't going to play, and the people who do play are just going to complain about how broken it is. Oh, but there's one thing, Nacho, you asked about sleeves in the cards. I haven't put my cards in sleeves, but there's quite a bit of wiggle room in each of the little box receptacles, so I'm thinking that would work.
um, Jay Scott says in chat that he thinks it's not going to be good for new players. Um, I think that's why they included the cards, to make it easier for new players. Um, I think that it helps you introduce the game, um, by having these cards in front of your new players. And I've seen some criticism over the past week of like, if you don't like cards, you're not going to like Daggerheart, and I don't think that's true either, because you don't need to use the cards. If you don't like cards, you can just put everything on your character sheet, just like any other role playing game. Um, at
It's
least
not a
that,
deck builder.
right? Yeah, it's not a deck building game.
Right.
But I think some of the initial reviews that I've seen have literally said that, like, if you don't like cards, this game's not for you. And like, I don't see that. I think if you don't like cards, you just put everything on your character sheet.
It's like if you don't like purple, this game's not for you. It's like, okay, like, come on.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to even more Daggerheart stuff. So earlier this week, just a couple days ago, this was from Threads. D&D Wizards put out a message to Daggerheart, saying congratulations to our friends. Critical Role. They probably should have tagged Darrington Press, but what are you gonna do? It's Wizards. They're doing the best they can with what they have. Um, and then also this week on the Mastering Dungeons podcast, James Introcaso from MCDM was on there, and he was talking about how excited he was for Daggerheart, how thrilled he was for Spencer and Matt and co. And he talked about Shadow Dark and how amazing Kelsey is. And he talked about how he was like, oh, the guys at Darrington sent me Daggerheart months ago, but I haven't taken it out of the shrink wrap because I didn't want to unconsciously steal any of their ideas. And it was just really strange to hear, not strange, but just it made me think, to hear James be so exuberantly effusive in his praise of competing products. Because I worked in the software industry for a long time, and you would never think to celebrate a competitor's release. That would just be bonkers. But in the TTRPG industry, it's very different. It's a much more peaceful place to be, despite the fact that I know it doesn't feel like that to a lot of us a lot of the time with all the toxicity, but compared to like a corporate environment, you can actually say, I'm looking forward to my competitor's product come out, because the way TTRPGs work, it's not like a car that you buy one and drive for 10 years. It's like a book that you buy and then you want another book, right? And I just think this is, a little moment of bright positivity here that we should hang a light on.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good thing. And I remember a few years back listening to Hank from Runehammer talk about playing old school Essentials. And people in his chat were like, why are you playing old school Essentials? You wrote your own game, index card RPG. And he was like, because I can. like
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love my game that I designed, but I want to be able to try other people's games because I learned from playing other games. And now recently, he made some comments about how he's playing 5.5 and really enjoying it, and even debunked the idea that 5.5 characters can't be, you know, that they can't be killed, and that 5.5 isn't deadly enough. He says, we've played like 14 sessions and we've lost 3 characters already. Um, and he was getting some backlash in his comments from people who are like, are you a shill for WotC now? And it's just funny how people think like you have to be like this loyal follower of just one game.
The opposite's true too of making your whole identity just being anti one game. You get off the internet, it's a lot nicer out here. I've been sitting down with a lot of cool creative folks in a bunch of different aspects, but there's been a wave of like game designers on my little talk show, and yeah, hey, they're all friends. They all hang out. They're all playtesting each other's games. It's great over there. You don't have to participate in the slugfest, the mudslinging. Like, nah, that's dumb. We just did Dragon Week. We're about to do another collaborative jam. Just like the more good vibes, the more cool games, the more fun that's being had, the better it is for everybody. So don't let one bad actor or some anonymized commenter let you lose sight of that. This is a dope hobby. We are in a veritable golden age. There is so much cool stuff out and like on the cusp of coming out that like, woo, buckle up. We're having a great time.
Yeah, and like for example, Kelsey Dion from Shadow Dark, she wrote a sci-fi setting for Index Card RPG, right? So like Shadow Dark is a direct competitor to Index Card RPG, but she and Hank are friends, and she's like, "Oh, I have a cool idea for a sci-fi setting," and boom, now it's in one of Hank's books. Like, you know, like a lot of these game designers know each other and get along and are friends outside of, how a lot of fans interpret things.
Indeed. All right, so moving on as we're passing the midway point, it's time to actually talk about something that's not Daggerheart. Earlier this week, this guy over here, Brad Wolf from the Dire Den, ran a one-shot for me and Ryan and a couple of our friends. And what was the name of that one-shot, Brad? I'm not even sure I got the name.
Temple of the Moon Priest.
And Brad used the You Dare system, which, if you didn't know, is a beautiful one-page RPG written by these 3 guys you see on the screen here, and available for pay what you want or free on DriveThruRPG. Maybe someday coming to itch.io. We'll talk about it. But Brad homebrewed it a little during the game, and I thought that was interesting. So do you want to tell us what you did, Brad?
Well, yeah, our goal in writing You Dare was to give you a very simple, straightforward, one-page rule set that you can just take and run with in just about any direction. But we were playing an adventure that was written in a very old school dungeon crawl style, and I thought it would be important for us to have some sort of hit points to fit that dungeon crawl kind of style. But I didn't want to just do something simple. I wanted to, I could have just said, all right, all of you have 8 hit points, and we just treat it like D&D. But You Dare is kind of a different game. It has a different flavor. So I wanted to do something different with that. So I introduced conditions, kind of stealing some ideas from Peter's Tales from Elsewhere game. So that I made 2 conditions. You had a staggered condition and a wounded condition. And so if you failed a defense roll, you receive the staggered condition. And then if you are staggered and you fail another defense roll, then you have the wounded condition. And once you're wounded, you have to roll D6s instead of D8s. potentially creating a death spiral, but definitely something that could be quickly addressed because UDare is so flexible with its skill system that anybody can be like, well, maybe if I make a medicine check, or can I brew a healing potion, right? So it it was what I thought was an easy way to kind of put death on the line, but also make it so that you could effectively like short rest, right? Um, Once you're out of combat, someone can make a skill check to take away your condition. Um,
And one thing, Brad, that I liked is that you didn't bring it up until it mattered in the game.
Hmm.
You didn't mention it until it came into play, and I
So I got
appreciated
set on
that.
fire. I
Right.
was like, okay, so this is bad. So let's talk about this.
Compendium of Udare hacks. Yeah, Mike, you're in charge of that. All right. So moving on, we get to the part of the show we call the catch up, and first we want to say, hey, because we're multi-streaming to different destinations, you might be watching this on Ryan's channel or Brad's channel or my channel, but you could be watching it on the Landlocked Warlocks channel, which is the main chat hub. If you want to chat with everybody, you should go watch this live stream on the Landlocked Warlocks channel and subscribe to it, because that's also where we do a bunch of actual play and fun other stuff like watch old D&D 1980s clips and make fun of the Mystery Science Theater style. So who let's catch up. What's going on? Who's got something going on?
well, I don't have a lot to share. Yeah, hit the like button.
Smash!
Definitely. Smash that like button. I don't have a lot to share about what's going on with the channel. I'm kind of in the middle of my Monster Jam video, working on that right now. But just kind of proud papa moments. My oldest daughter, she's in her 20s, um, texted me and was like, "I'm playing D&D tonight. Can I come over and get a miniature out of your collections for my new character that I just made up?" So excited for her to play D&D with someone who's not her dad. She's got a group of friends and that she's actually got an invite in, and is going to be playing some D&D. So excited for her. And then my youngest son, he has been tinkering around with this old Magic the Gathering board game that I bought years ago because I buy cheap, crummy board games and cannibalize their parts for D&D miniatures. So he found this old Magic the Gathering board game, and he kind of made up his own game. So he took some dice and he kind of made up this game, and we played it. And then afterwards, I'm thinking, I think he's old enough now to kind of get into some skirmish war games. So I went out and bought Song of Blade and Heroes, which is an older, super rules light fantasy skirmish game. And we went through it, and he picked out the characters he wants to play and built a little war band, and we're going to test that out this weekend. So I'm excited.
Awesome. What you got going on, Ryan?
Like most of the dragon tubers, I am deep in the midst of making a 5-room dungeon appropriate to hand to other people. I've play tested the thing. I've thought about the thing for weeks and weeks. I'm super happy with it. And then there's the part of the process of like translating it into like, here, this is fit for human consumption. So yeah, if your favorite map making software has been a little bit laggy this week, it's because all of us are pumping out dungeons.
Yeah, I think I called it. Did I call it Monster Jam earlier? It's Dungeon Jam, right?
It's Dungeon Jam with a dope logo. There's been several iterations. I can't wait for it to be released into the world. I believe Emergent GM is responsible for this new one as well. But like, oh, it's pretty, folks. Stay tuned.
And I've got a video on Daggerheart coming out on Sunday. It's going to be a lot more concise. It's an actual concise review of Daggerheart coming out on Sunday. And I've got a recommendation. I discovered a band. They're not new, but they're new to me, called Fish in a Birdcage. You guys heard of Fish in a
Oh,
Birdcage? I'm
no, but I
obsessed with
like it.
them. Obsessed with them. They remind me of this Denver band called Devotchka that was sort of like Russian traveler punk. You know
Yeah,
Devotchka?
yeah.
Oh yeah, I used to
I
go see them
loved
in Denver
Savachka.
all the time. It's like Devotchka, very much, but more stripped down. Just a guy in a cello. Fish in a Birdcage. The songs are numbered. You want 34, 35, and 47.
One more time.
34,
Uh-huh.
35, and 47. The songs are called Rules, so it is Rule 34. But
Ooh,
you can
ooh.
actually
Whoops.
Google that. Rule
So,
34, Rule 35, and 47.
hey, gang,
Fish in a Birdcage.
type that into nothing ever.
Anyway, so moving on, we're going to get into our roundtable discussion, which is also not Daggerheart related. Look at you. We're giving you an extended break from Daggerheart here. Then we're going to get back to Daggerheart in a few minutes.
Are we?
But I definitely do want to talk about campaign frames. Maybe we can keep this discussion a little bit short, but there's Professor Dungeon Master put out a video called "The Two Types of D&D Players According to Science," and he gives examples of Sam Riegel and Orion Okaba. Ha! Tricked you. It is not Daggerheart related, but it's Critical Role related. So he gives two examples of two different types of players: the narrative player and the gamer. Where Sam Riegel embraces natural ones. He's looking for ways to boost everyone else at the table and engage them in the story, whereas the gamer is looking to win. And he Professor Dungeon Master goes on a long explanation saying nobody's all one or the other. And I was thinking about it, and I guess I initially pictured it sort of like a pendulum, or like a needle that leans one way toward the other. Sure, you're not all one, but you lean in one direction. But then I was thinking about Brendan Lee Mulligan. Because Brendan Lee Mulligan is the most gamiest gamer you've ever seen if you follow his career on game shows. He goes on game shows and he figures out the mechanics and figures out a way to beat the system to win. But he's also extremely narrative. He loves nat ones, just like that narrative player. And so I was thinking of it less like a needle and more like independent sliders. And Brendan Lee Mulligan is 100 on both sliders. And so I don't know if that's too heady to have a discussion about. But that's just what I was thinking. So what are your guys' thoughts on the two types of D&D players and percentages thereof?
Yeah, I think it's a fair way to kind of assess players, like which player is the gamer that wants to win, and which player is the kind of the narrative story, storyteller, actor. I think that's a valuable way to kind of assess players. Because I think that's a useful thing to do as a dungeon master. To kind of like, what do my players like? Do my players like puzzles? Not really, so I don't use them, right? Um, you know, my players definitely like combat, but they don't want it to be all combat, right? So you kind of gauge your players as a game master to kind of figure out, how to build your encounters and how to plan your sessions. So I think it's useful. And I definitely think there are, the stereotype is that the old school players, right, are a little more gamers, right? They lean towards, I want to solve things, I want to figure things out. I don't just want to use my character sheet, the OSR. Don't treat your character sheet like a control panel, that kind of mindset. And then, of course, the stereotype is that younger, newer gamers are more of the storytellers because they were all raised on Critical Role, supposedly, right? So, I with anything, you got to kind of be careful that these two categories don't get, further baked into those stereotypes.
Yeah, I think there's two kinds of people. One kind who thinks that there's two kinds of people, and one that understands that it's way more complicated than that. I'm not sure which one I am, but Two is not enough. I often talk, especially to like newer people coming into the hobby. Like I say, like the math kids and the theater kids, because you already know I'm not like being 100% serious, but there's like the tactical, crunchy side of the game, and then the truthiness of it all. I'm going to be true to the character. I'm going to do what serves the story best. I know what movie I'm in, and I want it to be as satisfying as possible. And yeah, I really think Brendan Lee Mulligan's a great example to hold up of like those are not necessarily competing ideals. Um, and the idea that the OSR crowd, I mean, I like old school stuff, is way more trying to win. Like kill a theater kid's character and watch, have them enter the lose state and see if they don't care about it, right? Like grinding through your characters to learn stuff or to tell a fun story is kind of a very old school principle. And, not be trying to be the main character the second that character's off stage having a bit of an existential crisis because you don't know how to make more interesting characters. I mean, it's a new player thing, I think, too. But it's not as cut and dry, even as Professor Dungeon Master. I mean, I think he admits in that video that it's not quite that. It's just a useful construct. Knowing what your players want is hugely important for a game master. And if your players are anything like me, they're going to get bored with the same thing. I love pizza. If I have pizza 3 days in a row, I don't want to see pizza again for a long time. Like the awesome thing about this hobby and this game and games like it is that Brad said it's 2 games at once, and I scoffed because it's like 17 games at once. Give them the variety pack. Some people are going to light up for more parts than others, and like a good fight has narrative stakes to it. A good roleplay interaction has super consequences, life and death, like right in the subtext. So you don't have to pick and choose. The more you can turn both of those up, I think, is you're appealing to both of those kinds of players and having peak D&D experiences. And then sometimes you got to turn them down and do beer and pretzels and make some stupid, fart joke or something just to keep everybody sane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chat's blowing up here. Let me
I have that
highlight a
effect
few
on people.
things. Nacho, I am
Oh.
super excited for you to run Parallel Pinebreak for your daughter and her friends. That sounds amazing. Thank you so much for downloading You Dare. We are glad that you enjoy it. Mike, you're 100% right. It can't have something to do with the culture of the group you play with. I feel like when I run tabletop games, I'm more narrative. I run them narrative. I love NPC conversations between, NPCs in the party. When I play, I'm more of a gamer. Especially depending on the group. Like I'm playing in a 19th level campaign right now, and everyone is multi-classed and super optimized. And if you make the wrong decision in combat, you're gonna get a side eye from the other players, and that's fun too. I love it. It's great. I love this. I've been playing the same campaign for 3 years. Obviously, I love it. So you can. ¿Por qué no los dos? You can spread on multiple axes, as we have learned in Daggerheart with hope and fear in the duality dice.
Oh no, it's happening.
Yeah. I would just point out, like, whenever somebody throws out these like gamer categories, right? It's important to remember that these are just a language to talk about stuff. There's no empirical research or data that are defining these categories. So none of these categories we throw out when we talk about player types or DM types are set in stone, right? I'm a therapist, and I can say this about love language. Love languages are not empirically researched. Some guy just made them up. So, but love languages it's a useful way to talk about your relationship, because it gives you a language to talk about your relationship. There's nothing empirical or scientific about love languages. And it's the same thing with these categories we make up for gamers and DMs. It's just a way to talk about something and to have an interesting discussion. None of these things need to be set in stone or used to label people.
Well, Brad, I heard that women are from Venus. How do you respond to that?
Oh God, that book's that.
Any comment?
Don't waste your time on men are from Mars, women from Venus.
There's some good truth in there, although it's anyway.
Yeah,
Also,
I had a professor who said, "Yeah, you can dig through the trash and find some useful stuff, but is it worth your time?"
Oh, I like that quite a bit.
Ouch. All right.
I've done some garbage picking in my day, and it was probably not worth my time. That's I like that line a lot.
I can't
Anyone
remember
who's
your
seen
name.
the finale of Critical Role Campaign 1 knows that Sam Riegel spends 2 hours very carefully measuring how far away he is from Vecna and casts a 9th level spell that he was saving for weeks. So to say Sam Riegel is not playing a tactical game, he is when it counts, when it serves the story.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, so moving on to something extremely silly.
Mr. Walsh
the
is
other
on
day-
record as loving dumpsters. Oh, I can't.
But it's timing, right? It's all timing. He dumpster dove during the Satanic Panic when everybody's throwing away their D&D books. That's brilliant, right?
Yeah. So moving on to the next thing that we're going to talk about is the thing we're doing right now. So I ended up on an AI website, Google Gemini. I know people have strong feelings about it, but this is something very silly and inconsequential. So I hope everyone will stow their absolute hatred, deep loathing and hatred for the next 2 minutes, because I ended up on Gemini and I thought, well, so let me explain why. So some author friends of mine and I have a fictional series called Suns Out, Nuns Out. It's up in the 40s now, where it's just about these secret agent nuns, and so we just make up like my friend Nick does photo covers in Photoshop of Suns Out, Nuns Out, and we just kind of brainstorm. Anyway, it's just a bit that I do with some friends of mine. Well, anyway, once I decided I wonder if we should write a Suns Out, Nuns Out novel. I'll just get AI to do it. And so I started trying to write a novel in AI. And what I found out was that AI is pretty good at remembering keeping the thread for about 1,000 to 1,500 words. And then it starts to forget things. So you can't currently write a novel with AI. It's impossible because it can't keep that many facts together for such an extended period of time. But I was like, I wonder how it would do writing a role-playing game. And I thought it would be, if it loses the thread, that would be even more funny. So I asked Google Gemini to create the rules for a one-page TTRPG called Paul Rudd's Rejuvenation Team, about a group of Paul Rudd's assistants who go on dangerous adventures to source the age reduction elixirs needed to keep Paul Rudd looking so young, for 4 to 6 players plus a game master. And so I think it starts off pretty good, telling you what you need, the rules, the game master. It's keeping the thread. Each player creates an assistant for Paul Rudd. And then you can have your own abilities like charm and distraction, espionage and infiltration. But you also get a stress level track. This I thought was very interesting. When a character faces significant danger or fails a crucial test, they gain a stress. If all stress boxes are filled, the assistant becomes flustered,
Ooh.
suffering a -1 penalty to all rolls until they can take a moment to center themselves. And the one thing I really like down here is this team resource called Paul's Patience. The team is a shared resource. Paul's Patience, represented by 4 tokens. Each failure, delay in acquiring an elixir costs the team 1 patience token. If Paul's Patience reaches 0, he might have a mildly disappointed phone call with the team, leading to narrative consequences.
That's kind of I like that as a resource. I might steal that and have just DM's patience at my next D&D game. Can I do this? And you just take one of the DM patience chips off your stack.
Rip it up. Yes, I am
Okay.
very polite to my Alexa, so that when Skynet finally takes over, they'll know I'm one of the good ones. I haven't, subjugated them to do all my whatever. People are using AI to do everything for now. And when I ask Alexa to set a timer for my baked potato, I say please and thank you.
Yeah. All right, moving on. So I was hoping we'd be able to have enough talk fast enough to get to campaign frames. And here we are. So campaign frames are where there's the list here. No, I'll have to go back. Campaign frames. Come on, where are we? Frames. Okay, here's the list of frames over here. So campaign frames are essentially sample adventures, but unlike D&D adventures, they are more like campaign guides. It's more like a gazetteer than it is because like Brad was talking about with a keyed map, there's none of that. There's no specific locations. It's more like a set of vibes and specific mechanics and alterations to the classes and ancestries for these specific worlds. Like the Witherwild is kind of standard forest fantasy. Five banners, and the point is each one is a very different genre, which I think is great. I think is Chef's Kiss very smart.
Yes.
Five Banners Burning is kind of a fantasy war faction thing, where there's a specific system just for factions, like for factions to develop renown with each other, etc. Just for that setting. Beast Feast is exactly what you think it is. It's delicious in dungeon. You play like a little goblin guy, and they have a special set of weapons. Like you don't get long swords, you get like pot holder, metal spatula, stuff like that. The Age of Embra as is what Daggerheart's doing right now. It's their crit board. Motherboard is fascinating. Motherboard is a Mad Max all magic is technology setting that has specific character sheets with cybernetic augmentations you can add to a character, and has a complete language, a code language. Then I'll look at that in a second. And Colossus of the Drylands is like it's very weird. It's like a mix of Western and Monster Hunter. So you're in this Western world where these big metal monsters just kind of appear out of nowhere, and so you have to go hunt monsters. So there's specific mechanics for gameplay of like a hunt phase and interlude phase. And the point with all of that, the reason why I explained all 6 of those is that they're all different and they all include their own special mechanics, which I think is super duper smart. If they had just included 5 forest fantasies, they would be branding the game as this is Dungeons and Dragons with different rules. But the fact that they give you all these different ones, like on Five Banners Burning. So it starts with the pitch of the campaign to give to your players. I like this a lot. It gives you a complexity rating. Like that's essentially saying how many subsystems and changes there are. Then it gives you, key players. It tells you like if you're playing a highborn, this is how it works in this world. Just like a lot of D&D supplement books do. And then I think the mechanics are at the very end. So it gives you all these different ideas for factional relationships. But the one I really wanted to show is Beast Feast. Because they have these. Try not to get dizzy as I'm scrolling. Sorry.
Too late. Cooking subgame? Cooking subgame?
So it has this cooking subgame. It's very robust. Because the way it works is that when you kill an enemy, they can essentially drop ingredients. So you have to go kill a certain number of enemies, roll dice to try to get sweet, salty, bitter, sour, savory, weird ingredients. Then you combine these, say like mushroom caps are 1 better, 2 savory. And so, but just the idea that like, it's not you kill a monster and you turn it into food, you kill a monster and it drops loot. And in this case, the loot is food. Like that's super smart.
Yeah, I think these frames are brilliant because that's one of the other criticisms I've heard about Daggerheart is that, it's this kind of generic high fantasy setting. And if you just look at the species, right, and the basic rules, I could see why people are saying that. But when you look at the frames and see how many different directions they take this game, it doesn't have to be generic D&D style high fantasy. You can do a lot with this.
Right. Like here is sorry, Brad.
I was done. Go ahead.
This is code. KOHD, so you have to say it in kind of a northern accent. It's code.
It's cold out there.
It's code. Writing and code. Language designed by Chris Willett, don't you know? He's a swell feller. Um, so the point of this is that this is a very I would never ever do this because this is like one of the nerdiest things I've ever seen in my whole life. But if you were into this, it essentially gives you this cipher to not only translate English into glyphs, but then it gives you all of these steps and all of these things like a way to, where is it like this is an if, this is an if then statement. And so what the game recommends is that like you learn how to do this. You write down, you give your players a note that has like the twist at the end of the campaign written out in this big coded message, and you give that to them in session one. And then over the course of the campaign, they're going to learn how to do this language. And then so by the end, they're going to be like, holy crap, I know what it says. I finally know what this message says that we've had since session one. And I would never do this because it looks way complicated, but that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, that's fascinating. And this is the motherboard frame. Is that what this one is?
Yeah, this is the one that they describe as Horizon Zero Dawn, Fury Road, Final Fantasy, Full Metal Alchemist, and Slug Blaster.
Yeah. Um, that it's not a frame that I would choose to play, but I could see like, I mean, I wouldn't run this, but if somebody else wanted to run this, I would play in this. It sounds cool.
Yeah.
Same. We need to sucker somebody into running this one for us. Chad, any volunteers?
Any linguists out there who want to learn another language and then run it for us? But you could probably run this without the code thing, with just the
Hey, Jim, could you show us the art for the Colossus of the Drylands? Because if it's the piece here that I'm thinking of, it's dope. I just want to play it. Nope, it's a different piece. Okay. That still looks cool, though. I love a good, like, weird West kit bashed, like, double genre dip. Like, I don't know. Maybe because I haven't played a lot of, like, Savage World or anything. Like, this feels fresh to me.
this is a perfect touchstone piece of art here. It's like two humans and a Draconis hanging out outside the saloon.
I love the like Shadow of Colossus kind of vibes, like the idea of like going out and facing off against these, giant, robot things. I think that's a really cool vehicle for a setting, right?
Oh, one thing. Oh, sorry, Brad. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's also not only reminds me of Shadow of Colossus, the game, that video game, but what's the oh shoot, the anime that's about the Titans that I'm drawing a
Like
blank on.
half of them.
Yeah.
Evangelion, Robotech.
The I can't think of it now. It's one of my oldest son's favorite animes, and now I can't think of the name of it. But yeah, so I think you could take these mechanics and go a few different directions with it. Attack on Titan. That's the one.
Yes.
Yeah.
One interesting
Thanks,
thing
chat.
about these Colossus stats is that each one is multiple stat blocks. Like one Colossus is considered like 6 different creatures. Got a stat block for the head, torso, forelegs. So like you can disable part of the creature without killing it.
Yeah, and so you can see yourself actually being on the creature, right? I love that, that game design that you actually have to get up on this thing and you have to fight your way up different body parts to get to the head or get to the heart or whatever to finish this thing off.
Let's look at the name of this creature. Killer, the virulent hater, and her hundred children. That's metal AF.
Yeah, it is.
I love that they're doing the thing, that they're going out on limbs, that they're trying stuff. Like, of the wave of Dragon Slayers that have come out of the OGL crisis, I was like, cool, we're going to get all this shiny, new, cool stuff. And we kind of got a lot of the same sort of thing that we've already had. And to be honest, I did not expect Critical Role to be coming out with the most unique or the like most diverse in a single package out of the big shops. And like, okay, there's still some we're waiting on like fully, but Yeah, I am super impressed with this. Even if this doesn't turn out to be like my main system or like the one game to rule them all, which I think we should stop even looking for. They're
Agreed.
doing a lot of cool stuff. And I think a lot of people are going to have to put aside whether or not you like the show, whether or not you like the fan base, whether or not your preconceived notions of like what the perfect game looks like is for a minute, put all that down and like try something new. There's a lot of folks who are yelling at everyone who will never try anything but 5e, who are in their own little individual silo. And whatever it is, broaden your horizons. You might learn to, steal something and bring it back to your silo, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think there's two very good points that you make there, Ryan. One is that no, this is not going to be the D&D killer. But along with that, I don't think we need a D&D killer. And WotC does a pretty good job of killing D&D all on their own. Um,
Oh,
but the other good point here is that um, I think they are landing in a pretty sweet spot game design wise, right? Because if you compare this to the other new games that are coming out, this is not as crunchy. At least it doesn't seem to be as crunchy as Draw Steel or Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere game.
mm,
And it's less like D&D than any of the other ones, like DC 20 or Shadow Dark or any of those other things that are more D&D adjacent, right? So I think they're landing in a pretty sweet spot where they're not as crunchy as the other new games that are coming out, and they're not as D&D like as the other new games coming out,
Yeah.
which is going to be good for them. I think marketing wise, the smartest thing they can do, and chat asked about like, are they going to have an open license for third party? I think the smartest thing they should do is they need to release an adventure, a published adventure for each frame. Like over the next year, they should have a published adventure for each one of these frames,
Hmm.
and then that gives your consumers something to buy. What am I going to play? How am I going to play this? And then once they get a bunch of their own adventures out, then have an open license for third party creators. You can do it similar to the DM's Guild, where you you control what frames people can write for. So once you have like maybe 2 adventures out for each one of these frames, then you can open the frames in the core book up to third party creators,
Hmm.
right? So then I could go and write a Titan AE themed frame that you could use, or Titan AE themed adventure that you could use with the with that particular frame, right?
Right.
But then they could come out with new frames. So then you come out with new frames, and you don't submit those to the open license right away, right? So that way they're generating new content. They're also inviting third party creators to make new content. And I think that's the way to get a game to thrive, is to put a bunch of stuff out there.
Well, they have a third party license. It's basically the same one from Candela Obscura. They had one there, and they've just updated it. But it's I took kind of a cursory glance through it. It seems pretty forgiving. There's nothing heinous in there that I saw. I do really like that on a legal document they refer to Darrington Press as DRP, so it says DERP over and over and over again throughout the license, which I had to be intentional.
Yeah.
That's got to be a joke. And I
I
like
mean,
that quite a bit.
look, knowing nothing about any of it, and like we're into like legal territory now, but I just found the Daggerheart SRD 1.0 is 135 pages. So that's a lot of pages. That's a lot to work with. You can see, like,
Yeah.
based on nothing but page count, it seems like they're giving you a lot to work with.
And we're running out of time here, but I really want to get to this. You might have heard earlier this week that there were some new WizKids minis related to Baldur's Gate
Oh.
3, and they did not meet our expectations. So there's a good example. There's Withers on the right, and there's this mini on the left. And yeah, there's Withers. That's Will. And there's Karlak. And there's Asterion. And this one's pretty bad.
That was
Some of
really
these are
bad.
not terrible, but the problem is that they used basically like 3D generated scans of the original for the marketing photos, so it looked like you were getting picture perfect minis. That Gale? I don't even know who that is.
Yeah,
Ooh,
yeah,
nice.
those are pretty bad. Um, but yeah, these are to answer the question, chat. They're 28 millimeter like WizKid size pre-painted minis, right?
DMG Chapter 2 is probably not going to happen today, Twin Steel. Very sorry. My apologies. And we'll get to it next week for sure. Brad, we've got 5 minutes. Do you want to do the thing or do you want to save that?
We can save that.
Okay.
Yeah, and but yeah, just on these minis things, like it's from what I understand though, WizKids like put out a public apology. They admitted that these were bad, right? Like there was, um, were they actually refunding people's money though?
Yeah, WizKids offers full refunds.
That's smart. Because WizKids is, it's its own company. Um, so, but they are very WotC adjacent because most of their products are licensed WotC products. So you don't want to get lumped in with like the evil, corporate overlord perception that WotC has right now. So it's smart of WizKids to be like, oh yeah, these suck. We're sorry. Here's your money back.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so we're gonna wrap things up now. Like I said, I have a full review of Daggerheart coming out on my channel on Sunday. And let me say this about Daggerheart: I'm excited for it. I'm old enough and wise enough to know that this will not solve all my problems. Um, whereas the exciting new game system always promises to solve all your problems, or people at least assume that it does, and it's not. It's not perfect. I don't know if Daggerheart is the best game that's going to come out this year, but I do know that I think it's like what I'm looking for. I think it's and it's a perfect time because I don't want to learn 5.5. I don't want to learn it. I don't care. I don't give a crap. I'm ready to take a break and do something else, and so I think the everything aligned, and I'm very excited to see. I hope that I hope in the future that you would be able to find a Daggerheart game any night of the week like you can a D&D game instead of having to do it on Thursdays because that's the only day when the 5 people in your town who play Daggerheart are playing it, right?
I have a theory that Thursday will not be game night for
Oh,
Daggerheart stands
fair.
because they have a previous engagement,
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a solid point.
and that might actually be a benefit to Daggerheart.
Yeah. I am very open to learning Daggerheart, so I'm looking forward to Jim running a game of it for us, so I can make an informed opinion about this game. I like what I see so far.
Yeah, I'm going to be running it for these guys in just a couple weeks. You may or may not see that on the channel. I don't know if we're going to record it or what. Who knows? Who knows? Anything could happen.
I'm going to curse a lot,
right,
so it'll never see the light of day.
Ryan's going to paint horribly offensive things on his forehead. So
I've got a lot of forehead. I got a big canvas to work with, so I can get a lot up there.
Hey-oh.
Hey, it might be a good way to get a sponsorship,
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Race
Hey,
car
Chad.
drivers do it. Why can't actual
Yeah.
players do it? Why can't I wear?
Make me an offer. I'm listening.
I'll wear your merch. Make me an offer. Yeah.
Just get a big old Daggerheart tattoo on the top of your forehead.
Whoa, what are we talking, Brett? Come on. Temporary
Let's-
tattoos are not cheap.
Let's see some numbers. All I hear is talk. All right. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. And you know what? We'll see you next week. Laters.